Yeah, that expectations of others, or what do other people think of me, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, a lot of it was therapy for sure. Sitting down with someone more educated at the time, on how to just everything back to the idea of what's normal. I mean, even today, people are like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I don't know. How am I?" Like, I don't know. So there's still elements and moments of that, um, but it's okay. I mean,
Today is going to be an extremely insightful and powerful and probably moving episode. We've got Chad McCormick joining us from Canada. How are you, Chad?
so far so good. It's early.
Yeah, it is actually early. It's probably the earliest podcast I've done in a while, but doesn't take away the energy that we're about to bring. So we connected. We first met at a Brett and Brett event here in Nashville, and as soon as I walk into a room and there's a dude with a beard that looks as good as yours, I just beeline it because it's like aspirations, what I want to achieve, and we hit it off well. You made us feel very welcome for being there. And then, we connected a couple more times over the next week while you were still in Nashville. And we had some pretty deep conversations, I would say, for two blokes that just met. And I walked away from the last time we caught up thinking, man, I took away so much from that. Our audience can probably relate and learn a lot from some of the experiences that you've had, Chad, and also just the perspectives on life and what you're doing. And I know you've just got back from some travel with your son doing water polo. So I guess that's probably a good place to start around why you're investing so much time with your children now as a role model, and then we can sort of navigate from there.
Yeah. Well, good morning. Yeah, and I can see you're working on the beard, so that's great and a good start. And the 5 o'clock shadow, everybody can get there. It's the next stages that are tricky, but
It's the
the
Movember. I've grown it in, and
yeah.
Amy doesn't disapprove, but doesn't love it either.
Yeah, you can over time. Yeah. The dad thing, yeah, no, I mean, when you look at it, and we kind of, I mean, as you're starting out in the family life, it's amazing when you start getting, like, I'm 52 now, so my kids are older. They're 19 and 17, and you really start to realize that you've hopefully guided them somewhat into being, their own little great humans. And in that is that you just got to let them go a little bit, and that's the hard part, because you're with them morning, noon, and night for 18 years, and then the change happens, and they got friends, and they can drive, and they go out, and you don't know when they're coming home, but they're adults, so they don't have to tell you, and then they're gone. So it's yeah, it really happens pretty quick. So I figured it out probably about 10 years ago, that, well, I guess it was probably right when I quit drinking, which will probably be somewhere else we get to. But the uh, the idea that if you've only got so much limited time, what are you spending it on? And for me at that time was really trying to be um, present to the kids, and everybody's like, oh well, you're in such a rush to go somewhere, or such a rush to do something, but at the same token, just sitting there on a park bench with your kids, where's the rush to get anywhere? You're never late if you're in the right spot. So
Yeah, that's a great saying. You're never late if you're in the right spot. What was it for you, like that, I guess, penny drop moment, or the moment that you realized, we do have limited time? What are you spending it on? What sort of, was there an event or an experience that made you recognize that?
yeah, I mean, I think the first part was um, just really, there's it's a crossover between what you appreciate they're doing, to jealous of what they're doing, to that FOMO that you were as a kid, a fear of missing out, or living vicariously through your kids, where you've got some parents that go to an event and they're screaming at the ref, or yelling at their own kids, or yelling at other kids, or you get in the car later and you're just like, yeah, that Johnny didn't pass you the puck, he sucks. But in reality, maybe you never played the sport, so what do you even have conversations about that, about, let your child speak at that point. Let them tell you good, bad, or ugly, and then, you know, support them if they're down, for sure. I mean, we all get angry, we all get mad, but it's what do you do with that next moment, and how long do you let them stay in that moment? And so there's a lot of that with sports, with my older guy hockey, younger guy water polo, and just saying, okay, great, you have 1 minute, rant, go nuts, get mad at the coach, the ref, whatever it is. The next 10 is on you. How could you have done it better? What else could you have done differently? And maybe there's nothing, but at the same token, for them to realize that and for you to give them that space, I think is where you both grow.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. Something that I guess can't relate to at this point because I don't have children, but I know a lot of our members of our academy have children, and then also a lot of the listeners do. And there's definitely the helicopter parenting where you want to sort of make sure that nothing goes wrong, but the mistakes is where people start to really figure themselves out and work out what works well and what doesn't. So it's definitely something that I'm grateful I get to pick your brain and plenty of other people's brains around how to actually figure out what that is, because I don't think anyone really has the secret formula. It's just a day by day approach.
Well, it's a lot to do with kind of that idea of pride. It's okay to be proud of your kids, but it's better to show them to be proud of themselves. And then talking about other people's success, whether it's yours or your kids or your friends or anyone. And if you can, you equate it by, I mean, sport's been a big part of my life for a while, but the guys playing a high level competition, at the end of the competition, whether it's a tournament or a game or whatever, they all shake hands at the end. So it's a respect thing. Even though they lost the game, they're going to shake the hands of the guys that won. And so
Mm,
I think if you can take that into your everyday life and go, well, this guy is in my same lane. He's doing the same job I am, but he's very successful. You know, celebrate that too. Go up and say congratulations. That's like, and genuinely, you have to give that. You have to go, well, that is, I don't know how you did that, but that's amazing. And it's amazing how fast you will grow when you see other people's and recognize and give recognition for, what did I call it? Kind of an emotional gratitude for other people. And it seems hard to do, but once you get in it, it's pretty addictive pretty fast. So, and I mean, if you take a minute and look at Callum Scott when he's on, he gets a golden buzzer. If you ever look that up, and watch the emotion on stage, off stage, the judges, everything else. But if you put yourself into his moment and you go, like, don't put your shoes on his feet, put yourself in and your shoes in his moment and pretend you're standing on that
mm,
stage. Look out to the crowd, listen to what his emotion is, and just absorb that for a minute. Pretend that you're there, and feel that, and that emotional gratitude, and just feel how he must have felt given his backstory, given everything else. Like, how does that room resonate? And then you bring that all the way back to today. And when you can share that with someone that has done something that is an achievement, or doesn't have to be very big, you know, someone just needing a hand across the street, and you're just like, let's give them a hand.
yeah, context definitely matters there. Quite often, yeah, as you've sort of touched on there, we're always looking at things through our own lens, which is our experiences, beliefs, and values to that point, rather than stepping out. Because when you say, I guess the significance of what some person achieves, an individual might go, that's easy. I was doing that when I was 3 years old. Whereas that individual, they may have been working towards that for 20 years to achieve that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, that's why context is so important. And the seek to understand before being understood is a really good quote that I love. And once again, I try to live by it. I'm not perfect with that, but there's definitely moments where I might get frustrated at someone or whatever the emotion I experience from it. And then it's just like, okay, well, what path have they walked to this point to get there? Because it's definitely different to what I have. Otherwise, they would be getting the exact same results that I'm doing in a specific situation. And I would hope that people take that approach with me as well when I maybe frustrate people or agitate people as well.
Yeah, and that's where curiosity keeps poking its head into many things. So if you can be curious about the moment, or why would someone say that, or why did they do that? And uh, sometimes it's just simply as easy as asking them, or asking them to reframe it. Just say, hey, that came off a little bit. Can you ask it again in a different way? And so I think whenever you get curious about that, and I look at it, it's like people. I don't know if you've ever heard the kind of the analogy of you have to go upstream to fix a problem, and sometimes so what happens is. If you're downstream fixing a problem, that means you're just, the water's coming down, hitting wherever you are down the stream, and you're just repairing the bridge every time, or putting a new thumbtack in the dam. But if you go further upstream, maybe you'll find out that the trees are getting knocked over because the beavers are chewing them down, and the trees keep coming down and hitting your bridge. So, well, if can we help the beavers out? Can we move them? Can we do something different so that we're not having to fix the bridge all the time? But then you got to look at it the other way and go, well, if you go upstream and fix it, then what's the new problem you've created downstream? Because there's never not a consequence to anything. It may not be your problem, but it's someone else's. So you have to go upstream and then come back down, and so it's just this dance of kind of looking at it. Kind of, I call it a 4D approach, but you always have to look ahead and behind, and as many angles as you can throw at it.
How do you do that in everyday life? Because to me, that sounds like it can be very overwhelming. It's like there's more things to juggle. You might have four balls in the air, but it also sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me when you go, okay, well, there's always a consequence to every action that you take. So, how for you personally do you, I guess, juggle that?
Yeah, it's a good one. There's a few things. So, yeah, no, I can totally see how it's. One is, can you change it? So if something's happening, or an event, or a moment, can you make a change? If the answer is no, then why spend any more energy on it? You can't make a change, so just either be present to the moment and enjoy whatever it is, or take away from it as little as you can. And if you can change it, do you want to? And if you want to change it, then make the change. Simply just whatever that is, even if it's painful. Sometimes you're like, this is going to hurt me or hurt someone else a little bit, or but if it's the right thing to do, you might have to do that. And sometimes that, again, that's that upstream change that's going to create new problems downstream. And but the obstacle's the way sometimes too. So I mean, there's just so many different things to look at that I've kind of formulated it around, and still always comes back to being present. Sometimes it's you know uh, what's the analogy? Is this just don't just do something, stand there. And to be the only person standing still when a fire is going on or people are running and going crazy, you can just go, okay, what is actually happening, and take a look at the
Mm,
whole thing. And don't get so caught up in everybody's every day, because it's real easy to fall into a wake up in the morning, go to bed at night. What happened today? I don't know. Same thing as yesterday. Well,
yeah.
that sounds amazing.
it,
Curious.
it,
You gotta read up on something. Look at something different. Like when you're going for a walk, look up. Have you seen the top of this building ever? No. Stare at it for a minute. Like, what? How did the guy build that? Because we're losing that. More and more, people can't build what was done 20 years ago, let alone 500 years ago. Exactly. Yeah.
these mobile phones, when since we've moved here, it's obviously shaken up my whole routine. It was like Groundhog Day every day in a good way, like, but it was just rinse and repeat with how the days were. Whereas now there's so much, I don't have to do as much face to face work. A lot of it's online, but that then gives me the opportunity to have a lot more free time. So it's like go do things. Liam and I have been literally running our way around Nashville, and
Yeah.
we've been doing it in different routes. And so I'm like, we've run past this place 3 times and I've never noticed this building. How? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, it's interesting. And then I got in an elevator yesterday after our run, and this lady just didn't talk because she was on her phone, which once again I'm guilty of doing that as well. But I'm like, she just missed an opportunity to meet someone. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. And so, as much as the phones connect us in certain ways, when we're looking down, we're not looking out, and you don't know what opportunities are there for you, or I guess perspectives to take. And for people who don't have a life that they're happy with, whether it's in their relationship or with their health, or maybe just in their own mind, it's like, I don't think you're going to find it in a phone.
No.
I think you need to start obviously within yourself, but just start being curious. And that was one of the things you said to me when we were standing back just after Queen. And you asked me, actually, we're walking to Queen. You asked me this very interesting question. I was like, it's a fascinating question, which was, you just said, what are you curious about right now? If you were to have 30 minutes, what would you want to learn about?
Yeah.
And
What'd
it's
you come
funny.
up with?
Well, I remember what I said to you, and it was, human psychology and all of that sort of stuff. But the more I've thought about it, I'm like, that's a default response to me because that's a space that I work in. So it's like, I should be curious about that, which I
Mhm.
am. But there's also random other stuff that I'm interested in at the moment that has nothing to do, I guess, with the work that I work in. It's like stand up comedy. I love how people tell stories and engage people, but also how they, I think about, is that how they wanted that joke to land, or is it not? Like, I'm always thinking about that. Then music, obviously, my wife's a musician, but I'm trying to understand how people feel music and all of that sort of stuff, because I don't feel that that's in my body. So that's the sort of stuff that I'm watching YouTube videos on, or Googling and reading about, or I bought a few books last night on that sort of stuff, because it's just like, the information may never help me with anything, I guess, in my career, for example, but it's just interesting to me and I want to learn about it. But it could also then become a story or an experience that I can then share with someone to help them move from A to B, for example. So that's what it was for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest part is if you if you look back or look at your Google history and it's kind of all the same thing. It's not you're not growing from that. So the ability to find something new to waste 30 minutes on is not a waste of 30 minutes. You may feel that way, but learning about something that either you knew nothing about or enhances something you already do, I think is just it gives you more frame reference later. For me, I called it the beard of knowledge because I don't know what's in there, but if you ask a question, I probably for some reason have some sort of answer. But I blame it all on curiosity and then critical thinking around it. So, and you go back to the kids, that was a big part for me as well, is trying to have them understand that it's their responsibility for kind of how they think a little bit or their answers. They go to school and they come back and it's like, well, Tommy said that, this is why this happened. And you're like, okay, well, is it true? And they're like, well, I don't know. Tommy said it. It's like, well, let's look it up. And that's where Google comes in. You can go, well, Google it. And they're like, yeah, see right here. Tommy says this. I'm like, okay, well, ask Google the other question. What's the wrong side of this? Or is it true? Or is it a scam? Or is it false? And then Google comes up with 10 more that way. And you're like, okay, now what? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you need to make a decision. Like, which side do you think is right? And they said, well, there's way more over here. And I'm like, well, at the moment, then I would go that way. But I said, be prepared to, if someone comes up with better evidence, then change your mind. To get stuck in your mind is not very helpful either. If you believe the same things today as you did 30 years ago, either that's really good, solid framework, or, you're not looking for enough change.
Yeah, you're definitely not challenging yourself. And that was a good example of the critical thinking. I think it's something that is definitely lacking for individuals today. We're so used to being told what to do or what to believe. And then the flip side of that is many of us are almost fearful to share what we believe at this point in time, because you see the online abuse and how people just can't have debates anymore. It's just like, as soon as someone disagrees, they tend to just want to tear you apart, rather than, once again, going back to that quote, seek to understand and also accept that you may not agree, which is completely fine, but also value someone's viewpoint, which, I think because of that, a lot of critical thinking's gone and a lot of critical communication's gone.
If someone doesn't have enough time to sit and patiently have an argument, then they haven't done a very good job of their own thought process, because they're just attacking the one thing you're saying over and over. So yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's pretty easy to poke holes in those, because they haven't spent time on it. They just, someone told them something, they believe it to be true, and they don't want to see the other side.
So is your process for developing, I guess, opinions and beliefs, sitting down and I guess looking for evidence on both sides and then formulating your opinion based off experiences and the information that you've taken?
That'd be a good way to frame it, for sure. When I quit drinking, it was quite interesting, because it's like the question is, what's normal, or what does that person do, or what? Because you're kind of looking at a reframe of yourself. And during that period, I came across a book called Code of the Extraordinary Mind, um, and I think it's chapter 8, and they talk about leveling up, and how to, what are you really good at, and as far as um, the 8 or 10 criteria, and what are you really bad at, and then how do we bring up the ones you're not good at. um, but the process of doing that is the understanding that if your brain is simply like a computer. Every 8 years you're buying a new iPad or Microsoft Dell computer, yet you've got the same brain you had 8 years ago. Well, no, that's not possible. It's totally changed. So why not be cognizant of that change and go, well, look for something that you believe in, but if something comes across as a better response to that, or a better belief, or you can say, well, that makes way more sense, pull out your idea, put this one in, and go, I'm going to live with this one for a while. It might be painful for those around you to live with you for a bit while you're doing this process, because, well, they said, well, yesterday you said that, and I'm like, that was like a year ago to me. If it was yesterday, I've changed 50 things. That's the only one you noticed. Great. um, but you'll you'll eventually settle, and end up with probably the friends you should have had all the way along. So
Yeah, so it's definitely the journey to get there. And that's, I still remember when, you know, it's the exact same thing. Who I am now is very different to who I was 10 years ago. And I remember because I had Facebook pages made about, well, when I say pages, I had one made about me when I was,
dozens of pages.
yeah, dozens. Um, and I remember because I was, running events and trying to inspire people and all of this sort of stuff. And this lady's like, he's such a fraud. He's done this. And I'm like, I have. But if you don't believe that an individual can learn from those experiences and change, you're fucking kidding yourself. And you're just wanting everyone to stay where they are, which means I would be a bit of a prick of an individual for the rest of my life. But that's not what I wanted to accept. And the challenge for a lot of people when you do start, shifting your beliefs or having different thoughts and ideas, is it can highlight things for them as well. It's like maybe they aren't moving as quickly, or maybe they, don't have enough challenge or adversity or critical thinking in their life, whatever it may be, and they don't like that change. It's uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable for everyone in every which way. But if you can once again sit back and ask yourself, why is this individual doing this? Even if how they're doing it you may disagree with at the moment. Is it because they want a better life? Is it because they want to be a better husband or have better health? Then that's okay, because they're going to get feedback, right? They're going to get their own feedback that then enables them to go, that didn't work, but I'm going to pivot here because I still want that outcome, as opposed to just going, I'm never going to be healthy, I'm never going to be a good husband. So I think people need to definitely start considering that a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch there. I mean, it's crazy when you look at it and you go to, it's kind of like loneliness or being alone, and understanding that they're pretty different. And if you're lonely, then that's a different thing to try and work on, whether that's with therapy or friends or family, but that you need to seek someone else trying to help you out. But being alone, when you can get comfortable in that, I think that leaves so much room for that ability to grow, and be curious, and find things, because it's not a bad feeling to be alone. It's just like, okay, I got time to myself. Now what? Like, do I go for a run? Do I work out? Like, what am I doing? what do I want? Which was another big piece for my development was kind of the mirror that we all live in. And it's really interesting when I just laugh at sometimes you get these, the human walking down the street in a wardrobe that you don't think humans should be in. Uh, and you go, well, that person got up, got dressed, stood in front of a mirror, and went, damn, and then walked out. And now the beauty is they're done. They're not looking in the mirror anymore. Now that's everyone else in the world's problem because now they have to look at this and go, what is going on right now? I don't understand. Like,
How?
you honestly went through the closet and like it's crazy. It's crazy to me. And then to realize that we all do this. So every time you leave the morning, that's it. You're saying to the world, here you go. Now you get what you get. But I would say at the beginning for my journey was it was more of that. I was a very reflective person. So I was I would absorb the mirrors of others. I was like a chameleon. So whatever anyone else was doing that I thought, wow, that's super cool. I wish I could do that. I would just take it and take it and take it. And then I would reflect back kind of the best of that, which wasn't really me. It was just a shell of me, but I was forcing a mirror out of what I wanted people to see. And a lot of that is, ego and all of that falsism and everything else. And how do you look or what's this? Well, yeah, I spend time on my beard. Well, but it's like a small brother to me. So I respect my beard. So it's like, how do you do that? Right. So now I would say that now I am just more of a, I guess, what did I write earlier? I said, I get to reflect the true self now. So it's now more, I don't absorb other people's, I just actually reflect the true self a bit more. So.
How did you get to a point where you were comfortable reflecting the real self rather than the adopted pieces from other people? Like, because there's got to be an element there where you just become so comfortable in who you are and also stop trying to live up to expectations of other people.
Yeah, that expectations of others or, what do other people think of me and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, a lot of it was therapy for sure, sitting down with someone more educated at the time on how to just everything back to the idea of what's normal. I mean, even today, people are like, "How are you?" I'm like, "I don't know. How am I?" Like, I don't know. So there's still elements and moments of that, um, but it's okay. I mean, when you can get comfortable with the outcome doesn't matter or time doesn't matter. I know everybody's busy, but if you can be productive, you'll end up with more time and stop being busy. And then when you shift some of that time back to just being present, again, if you're in the right spot, you're in the right spot. So why do you want to move so fast? And it's funny when you miss one moment and hit another, and the other one, you're like, man, I'm glad I didn't take that last moment. That's when you start believing in the fact that being present is so impactful.
That was something we discussed as well one day when we caught up. Was your ability to be present, like where you are is where you're meant to be, and you were explaining sort of how you were able to get to that point. Because obviously, I was sharing how I find it very distracting. I can jump on Instagram and see someone in, maybe in my field of work that's doing something. I'm like, oh, I need to work harder. I need to be better, or you can be at one situation. FOMO, essentially FOMO. There's always shit going on, and we miss it. So, can you sort of run through that process?
Yeah, so that one's it's really hard because it's so easy to get distracted in something that you don't necessarily. If you could pull yourself from yourself and look at it and go, is that really what I want to do right now? No. But you get into the some call it the monkey brain, or you're on autopilot, and a lot of that social media or that the moments that you're really wasting on nothing are if you're gonna do it. Like it's get in or change, and if you're gonna Instagram, just go deep. Like spend 10 hours and get in there, and then go, okay, I'm done for a week. Like I can't. Like it's like tequila. I've had too much, and so I think it is hard, but at the same token, when you start seeing, if you can kind of measure it a bit and go, well, what was the outcome of my 1 hour on Instagram? Well, I found this and I found that. Okay, well, what did you do with that information? Did you actually use it? Did you incorporate it with what you're doing? Did you go buy the product? Does it work? Did you use it? Like, what is it? And if you can follow the trail of all those things, well, then maybe there was some benefit to it. But at the same token, if you walk away from an hour of social media and go, I learned nothing, you're like, note to self,
Don't do it again,
don't do
or change the intention,
yeah, yeah,
or do
yeah.
it for an
Try
educational.
and do something else.
There was one thing you mentioned earlier when it was around the alcohol, and I know it was similar to your story, where you said, obviously, can you change it? Do you want to change it? Then just do it, right? It's a decision, draw the line in the sand. And I know you made that decision with alcohol for yourself. Many people, a lot of blokes especially that I speak to, they're like, I'm all or nothing. I can't just have one beer. It's like one beer or 1,000. I'm like, okay, well, what's the consequences of the 1,000 beers? Is it impacting areas? Yeah, it always does. Well, why don't you stop? Oh, I can't. So for you, what was it that, like, how did you just switch? What was the secret formula that everyone's looking for that you have that allowed you to switch? And especially, I want to also highlight you work in the hospitality industry, right?
Yeah,
You're a businessman, and you're in the hospitality industry where alcohol is part of the bloody furniture.
yep, yeah. I mean, how long's the podcast? Sorry.
We can make an exception.
um, yeah, the transit. I can believe why people would ever have one beer. Like that ever made no sense to me. But I'd have 14 drinks on Monday and 50 on Friday. And in 20 years, I would say there might have been a day or two where I didn't have a beer. And I also had the good or bad fortune, depending on how you look at it, that I didn't need sleep, and I still don't today. So, um, I would run pretty hard. I'd go 20, 22-hour days for 20 years. And so I would leave one event to tuck everyone in to go to the next event, and in that yeah, I mean, I did leave the family behind at that point, and I left partners and friends, and I think everybody was happy in the moment that I was able to give them, because I was such a great enabler to whatever the moment was. So, but again, it was such a chameleon moment because it wasn't about me at all. I would just go, I think you want this, so let's go. Like either raise all the boats or burn fucking every boat. And so even if I was wrong, even if I missed the boat and that wasn't what you wanted, you had no chance. You were still riding my wave and going with me. And so, yeah, there was some, yeah, a long run of life there. I wouldn't change it, of course. I mean, it's helped groom who I am today, uh, but the toll was pretty hard on the family and especially my wife. And, come home one day to, your bag's on the front step after a weekend away, and she's just had enough. She just said, figure it out. And that was the morning I just said, well, I either keep partying with the circus, or I get to know who my family is. And so I just made the decision to see who my family was and try that out for a bit. And in that, I went to therapy that same morning. I just knew that alcohol wasn't the problem. It was just I was letting alcohol be the problem. Like for me, I wasn't necessarily an alcoholic, but I was certainly riding the knife's edge that I could have slipped either way, and then I can see how that can be a real problem. Yeah, so therapy was probably the first key that really helped me, because um, it was comforting to know from an expert's opinion to say, look, you're when you drink as much as I was, your back lobes grow, and when your back lobes grow, your emotions take control of everything. And so, he said, the life you've led is your back brain. It has nothing to do with you. Your front lobes have shrunk to like peanuts compared to half your brain. So he's like, you really haven't been in control. And the easy conversation was, have you ever been in a fight with your wife and you didn't know why? And I'm like, pretty much every day. And he said, well, what happens when you get in a fight? And I go, well, I go to the bar. And he goes, you get a drink. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, that's your back lobe just squeezing there saying, I'm thirsty. Let's go get a drink. So, it was a really interesting time to try and go, well, who's in control here? Is it me? Is it my brain, mind, body? Like, what is all this? And then the second piece he said, well, your kids are young now. I mean, it was a decade ago. And he said, look, you're having, 15, 20 drinks a day on average. Your kids are going to have 30 drinks a day on average. And he said, so I'm going to see both your boys here in, 5 years, 10 years, you're setting them up for a not very successful life. And so I think I cried pretty hard for 4 or 5 days after that, just looking at what I'd done to my kids and family and how severe that was. Um, Not that alcohol was the problem again, it's just the fact that I could make a change and be so much better. And so then that was just such an awareness piece for me that I just said, well, I got to step away from it at the moment. And so far it's been 12 years. So we'll see. Maybe when I'm 80, I'll get back into Scotch.
Yeah, we'll have a scotch then. No, I I am always inspired by people who have managed to cut it, and I know it is, when you look at it logically, it's a decision, right? You just stop and you replace that habit with something else, and quite often you have to start looking at yourself. Why do I need this? For me, when I used to smoke and drink a lot, it was like socially, I just didn't feel comfortable, so I needed to have something in my hand. I had to have a cigarette or a beer, and now it's like I never like how I feel after a few beers. I always say stupid things. I catch myself and I'm like, why did I say that? That was stupid. And so now I don't have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I always have, one or two and that's it. But part of me wants to stop because I've spoken to so many people like yourself who've given it up for 10 plus years, and what they say has changed cognitively with their moods and emotions and how they've been able to learn and retain information and the life that they've created for themselves. I'm like, that sounds quite appealing. So what have you experienced from, I guess, the benefits in, I guess, growing yourself as an individual, information, business, career, family, from cutting out the drinking? And when I say cutting out the drinking, I know that you've said it wasn't the problem. It was just more the impact of that. But alcohol is a depressant, right? It does have impacts on the mind and on the body as well. So yeah, I'd love to know what that was like for you.
Yeah, I was always jealous of people that were using alcohol for the purpose of it. I mean, it's. I think if you again, back to being present. I mean, if the idea is you're going to go on a bender, great. I mean, you're planning that ahead. You're like, yeah, let's do this. Uh, like, get in there, go. But also that ability to take a go. I just want a glass of wine and just enjoy the where I am and just have a glass of wine or a scotch with a cigar and have one and then go to bed or do whatever they're doing. And so when I think when you look at alcohol for that type of lifestyle, I think that's amazing. I mean, you look at James Bond or whatever. I mean, was he have like two martinis and a whole 3 hour movie and he's doing his thing. So it's great. But when you lose sight of the purpose of it, I think that's when it starts winning a bit. But yeah, cognitively, it's been again 20 years of doing it. So um, I don't think I'm the same person I was a year ago, let alone 5 years ago, let alone a decade ago when I was drinking. So um, I went from 1,500 friends to 2 or 3, and now I'd say I have 5 or 6, and they're probably a lot stronger and healthier relationships than I've ever had. And all of that just comes from. I really can't say it, and I want to put curiosity and tattoo it on myself somewhere. That you really just have to
I'm
start.
curious.
You got to get curious about nothing or anything, or because like you said, you had to fill the void. And I remember through one of my therapy sessions, which was probably the worst part of my entire life. I've never really felt this before because I was able to deflect everything. It wasn't. I'd say I was like a bit of a geek as a kid growing up, and then you turn 18 and you discover alcohol, and now you're a hero. And so I was like, okay, well, this new person is unbelievable. Uh, Again, in the reflection that I see, but probably not truthfully. And so when you take that forward and you start looking at it and go, well, really, what am I doing here? Then I go through this therapy session where it's kind of like an armadillo shell that I had on, where I had no emotion. I couldn't feel anything, like nothing. You watch a sad movie, everybody's like, I'm like, well, what's so sad about this? And the uh, the therapy, it was. I can't even actually remember it because we were just into this moment, and but I remember it being a morning session, and midway through my session, she phones the front desk and says, "Cancel all my appointments today, as I am like a puddle in a corner." She's cracked the shell. The armadillo's come back, and now I'm just this flop of emotion. I can feel everything. Everything that's gone on in my moment, and um, that's when I discovered the problem with therapy is they can help you open the door, but then it's a long road to hoe after that, because now you got to deal with that door being open, because they don't close again. So that door being open was probably the best and worst moment for me ever, because after that I couldn't avoid the situation. I go to a bar or a restaurant, or one that I own, and I'm standing there, and guys like, "Hey, let's have a shot," and I'm like, "No, I don't drink." And they're like, "Whatever," and I'm just like, I can't, like, the noise, the volume, like everything it was too much. It was just like sensations I'd never had, and it was a long time, probably a year of that. Like, it was so brutal. Um, I can only recommend it now, 10 years later. At that moment, it was very, very unfriendly. And so that was probably where I had to learn to grow the most, because I said, well, like, why am I feeling that? Or what is that feeling? And then I had to poke around and look at it and sit with it. And so, yeah, it was a difficult time, but
I just commend you for having the mental fortitude to get through that, because just peer pressure from people, and obviously that being your place of work as well, would have been extremely challenging on a daily basis to have the fucking discipline, man. I like. I just think about it with chocolate now, man. I had chocolate last night and I pounded a block of chocolate. It's the same thing. It's like, if it's in the house, it's
yeah,
gone.
yeah,
That's why I don't let Amy bring it into the house. But last night it seemed to make its way through the door, and I was like, oh well, here we go. And you don't want to just leave that sitting around. That's for sure.
yeah. But it led to my why, and I think you and I talked about it a little bit. And I think the sooner you spend time on yourself and have a true conversation that someone can help you find your why, and why do you do things you do every day, or why do you see the world the way you see it, and
Mm.
you know, it gives you a bit firmer base to stand on when you're doing whatever you're doing, because 7 billion humans, we all do it differently. So, why do you do it the way you do it? And, mine is to connect, share, and grow, so that I can help others to connect, share, and grow their world. And the more often I do that, the better I feel about it. And, the resonation of taking it to a 12 is, you go into a bank teller and you're going to do something, and you're a bit grumpy, and so will the teller be, or soon to be. And or you hit the front door and you're like, okay, that leave it at the door a little bit, but just leave everything at every door. Just don't have any doors, and go
Yeah.
straight into the bank, and just go, hey, how's your day? What's happening? And you end up getting a 12 out of 10 experience rather than a 2 out of 10.
That curiosity piece that you speak about as well is probably a great place for people. Like, if people don't know what they're curious about, start by asking yourself why you do things.
Mm.
Why do you take shit with you through the door? An employer of mine when I was early 20s, remember when I started working there, he's like, I don't care what's going on in your personal life, but as soon as you step foot in here, you leave your shit at the door because you got to deliver for the people in here. And that stuck with me to this day. And I struggled with that for a long time because when you don't know much about your emotions, you generally carry that around and splatter that on everyone else. But then when I started thinking about things and asking myself, why is this, or how could I leave that at the door? What would that look like? How do I change my state? How do I let go of things that in probably 24 hours time, I'll look back and go, why was I stressed about that? Or why was I angry at that? Or why was that even happening? And that for me, the curiosity, and I think it is why I do the work that I do. It's you just get so fascinated in why people do what they do and why they're continuing to allow those things to hold them back from having a truly rich and fun fucking life.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, like, so it's interesting when someone else is having an emotional situation or a difficult moment, and um, leave your shit at the door is easy to say, but it's almost impossible to do. So then is when you look at, what are they going through? Can you put yourself in their situation, or put yourself in your shoes in their moment and go, oh man, that would be crappy, or that is shitty, or um, to really look at the idea and go that you're anything that happens, it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.
Mm.
So if you are in a bad way, there's a lesson in there, and if you look hard enough, you'll find it. But if you keep finding yourself in the same spot all the time, you haven't learned the lesson yet. And whether that's someone else showing you, or you know, again, sometimes people are doing what they normally do, and you're offended by it, or it bugs you, or I mean, again, that's for you. Like if something bugs you about someone else, that's your shit, not theirs.
Mm.
They're allowed to
I
break
love
down.
it.
People are allowed to cry. I mean, when you want it, you don't want it anymore. I mean, get out.
Yeah, literally. I think it's healthy. Chad, I appreciate your time so much, and I've got about 3 pages of notes here, which is always a good sign. You'll have given me some thinking work for tomorrow morning. And everyone on the show, I've filled up since I've just been in the States. I've filled up two of these where I just think and ask myself questions and just write, and then the next day I'll challenge that opinion. That's something that works well for me. And I guess the beauty of having a podcast is that I get to speak to people from all walks of life, and then I get to think about what their beliefs are, and then why would I challenge them, or all of that sort of stuff, and then I get to formulate my own opinions because I think it is so important to have your own opinions and have genuinely thought about things. So the conversation we've just had has done that for me. Chad, can people follow? Like, I know it sounds weird when you say, "Can people follow you?" But do you have a blog? I know you're going to start a podcast, which I cannot wait for you to launch. But if people want more of the Chad, where can they find you?
Yeah, no, that's a good comment. I mean, I've really been kind of getting to the point where I'm just going to probably start putting some stuff together. I am on LinkedIn. That's pretty easy to reach out there. I
Yep.
do have a Twitter as well. I'm not very active on them. So if you ask me a question and I don't get back right away, well, I will. But yeah, no, it definitely. I'm with you. I'm very excited to start a newsletter or of some sort of Chad's Curiosities, and I just I spend so much time looking at things that usually I spend enough time down a rabbit hole that I get to the end of it, that it's nice to share why I went down the rabbit hole and then what I discovered, and maybe save you the trouble, and don't go to the end of this one. If you get halfway, turn around. So I say, you don't know you're in a hole if you keep digging. So
That's a good point. Well, Chad, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, and thank you so much for your time.
yeah, all the best, Lucky.